Welcome, my name's David. This presentation is Expectations for Grad Writing, a Game Plan. I'm a tutor from the Judith Garland Writing Center. We have locations downtown and at 1604. And what we'll be discussing today is the difference between undergrad writing and grad writing and the rhetorical triangle. And also we'll be talking about writing as a process. You have pre-writing, drafting, revising, and editing. And we'll also talk about lead time, and I'll definitely get into that, and how to take researching and how to take notes, and also quoting and citing, which is very important in papers, and also some common errors that students still do as far as punctuation and mechanics. And we'll provide you with resources on how to help you write. So the first thing we should cover is what is undergrad writing? Well, undergrad writing tends to be short papers, 3 to 5 pages long. It's argumentative or compare and contrast. It's usually superficial research. Is a list or a short description of your findings and a generic conclusion. But grad writing, you'll have long, intensive papers, 10 to 20 pages, even longer, and you have to read and digest more articles. You have to identify flaws and weaknesses in your research, and you want to connect and synthesize the new information. And you also want to draw informed conclusions and recommendations with your writing. And this is an example of an undergrad paper. It tends to be just directed at one's audience. It doesn't cover anything specific, and it does have a thesis statement which covers like a laundry list of elements. Yeah, and what you would notice with this one, it'd be the typical upside down pyramid structure that does with most undergrad writing. It's written for the general audience. There's no indication of what the academic community would say about that topic, and the thesis statement is at the end, which is your typical laundry list. And this paper is an example of an argumentative paper. And the next paragraph is basically a grad writing paper. This is the introduction, and if you read it carefully, you will notice the difference. The address, let's see, and the things to notice on this, it addresses what the academic voice says is on the topic. And the mechanics is very good with it. It uses the rhetorical questions, which is not always okay, but it is used in grad writing. And it's written for a specific audience. And the topic is made apparent with no laundry list type thesis statement. And this is some feedback that you might hear from professors about grad writing. Grad students must learn to write for a more sophisticated audience. They do not need to recount a theorist's position and work. Instead, they should place the theory into the context to show that they have absorbed the theory and their audience already knows the theory. And this is the rhetorical triangle, which you should remember from your undergrad classes. You have the writer, the audience, and the purpose. And to define all these, your audience is what should you know about your reader. You definitely want to write to them. So you want to know how much they already know about your topic. You want to know what do they expect to see in this documentation as far as the format, the organization, and what style you're using. And it also addresses what prejudice and preconceptions might they have about your subject, and what they need to know about your topic, and what might their interests be. And then with your writer, it's how you want to present yourself to your audience. It's what impressions do you want to make for your reader, and how will you show that you are worth trusting, or is your credibility basically, and how will you demonstrate that you are an authority on this subject. And what do you have in common with your audience in order to create a bond with them? And your purpose for writing, which is what are you trying to achieve with this writing? It's not the grade you're trying to get. Basically, most grad writing is trying to persuade somebody. And you want to inform and also express yourself. And again, more feedback from your professors. Grad students tend to have, grad students have to allow enough lead time for the writing process. They need to have time to create their ideas and to see new connections and to edit out all the fluff. And one student has said, the biggest shock to me was when I went to grad school that that I had to start thinking about my papers months in advance before they're due. As an undergrad writing, I could write the papers the day before. But that doesn't work with grad writing. And writing is seen as a process. You will start at the top where you start writing your paper, you organize it, you draft it, then you'll revise it, and then editing, and then reviewing. But in reality, writing is more of a circular process. You will have your first stage where you frame your issue and you plan what you want to say and how you want to say it. And the second step would be gathering information, which is your research and your note-taking. And the third stage, you want to analyze all the information you have. And the fourth stage is definitely writing the report. And the fourth stage is definitely the longest and most complex. See, this is what writing is really like. You could start out by gathering your data, then move to organizing, and then jump to writing a draft, and then jump back to gathering information. You can really start anywhere you want, whatever works for you. Just remember, you can't always go back to your first step or to your fourth step. And as one famous professor has said, John Wesley Powell, he says, "A fool collects facts and a wise man selects them." And more feedback from the professors. Yeah, a grad student shouldn't make other people's ideas and research the meat of their paper. They need to develop their own ideas using research to support their claims. Again, the goal shouldn't be to refute or restate others' points. It should be assert your own points or ideas. See, more feedback from your professors. Grad students need to achieve a greater breadth and depth in their writing and their research. They need to find sources that are not directly related to their topic, but that nevertheless substantiate their claims. They also need to expand their sources beyond what they can find in JSTOR or Google. And research, again, research is definitely a circular process also. It starts out with a general research question, and you must be willing to alter your thesis as you collect data. As you collect and find things, you may change your whole idea and go in a different direction, but you have to be flexible when it comes to research. You definitely want to locate what you need, the general topic, and go beyond that. You want to definitely save everything that you do start with, take plenty of notes, and go from there. And you should be careful with what you do research. You should stay away from general research things like Google or Yahoo, and stick to the library databases. Those are your best sources. And when you're taking notes, you make sure you want to take good records. You want to develop a way to take notes that work for you. There's plenty of examples out there, but you want to find something that works for you. So you want to make sure you find some notation system that shows page breaks and whatnot. There's an example here that it shows where the line does break at no, and the next one starts at fat. And you also want to double check all your quoted material after you've transcribed it. You want to do that just to make sure when you do start writing, you don't have to backpedal and double check what you should have checked before. And once you do have a source, you definitely want to create what they call a working bibliography to ensure that you have the information that you need and to avoid last-minute rush to locate more sites, more sources. And there's also one thing you can use. It's called EndNotes, a way to supply that. It's through the library here on campus, and there is some tutorials that help you with EndNotes. It's just a form of citing and whatnot. And definitely, the first stage would be your drafting, and one thing about like we mentioned earlier, is the lead time. And this is what lead time means, is to start early. You definitely want to, don't wait to the last minute. Yeah. And stressing about deadlines is really unnecessary and exhausting. So in order to prevent all that stress, you can break down the process into smaller steps. On the first day, you go to the library, check out a few things. Second day, you want to record notes from 3 articles or so. Third day, you want to visit the Writing Center for a little brainstorming session to point you in the right direction. The fourth day, you can do more research if it's necessary, and so on. This way, if you set up little deadlines for you, you don't have to worry about the big pressure on you. Let's see, and again, when you begin drafting, be forgiving for yourself. The first draft should be a mess. Don't worry about your mechanics. You just want to get your ideas as fast as they come. Premature editing can stifle the most experienced writer. So if you can limit yourself to just expressing your ideas instead of, worrying about all the little, mechanics as far as capitalization, punctuation, and all that, save that for the editing portion, which is the third or fourth step. Remember, if you can, and you should schedule an appointment at the Writing Center to discuss your ideas, because clear thinking definitely makes clear and easy writing. See, and remember, there's a lot of blueprints for writing all sorts of papers. So it's not so daunting if you pick one of these blueprints to. They're basic outlines and patterns to follow. But this doesn't mean you can't deviate from the formula. And some of these blueprints won't fit the papers that you will be writing. See, in the first blueprint we have, it's your research paper. It basically starts out with an introduction, but provides provides the reader a bird's eye view of your topic. And if you need to, if the professor requires it, some background information on your topic and your research. And not necessarily background information on the writer or the researchers, but on your topic. And a literature review, which would be, or a review of the state of the arts, which is organized by ideas, not by authors. And that's a big point you should pay attention to. And you should state your research question or state your problem that you're trying to solve or address. And you also want to describe how you solved the problem or answered the question. And here you will have either a conclusion or a discussion section on research papers. And the second one is your classic argument. Classical arguments, generally you start with your introduction, which presents the general theme or the thesis of your argument. And the second part would be your narration, which summarizes the relevant background information, provides any information the audience needs to know about the environment, circumstances of your argument, and set up the stakes for what's at risk in the question. And the third part is the confirmation that lays out all the logical orders, usually from the strongest to the weakest, or the most obvious to the most subtle claim that supports your thesis. And the fourth section is the refutation and concessions, looking at the opposing viewpoints of the writer's claims, anticipating any objections from the audience, and allowing as much of the opposing viewpoints as possible without weakening your thesis. And the final section would be their summation, providing a strong conclusion, amplifying the force of the argument, and showing the reader that this solution is best at meeting the circumstances you presented in the first half of your paper. And the last one is the AMRAD, which are experimental reports. Yeah. And the first section, of course, is your introduction, which presents the information, any background, the scope of the problem, the clarity, and any pertinent literature that it's oriented to your reader. And then the next one would be your method. You'd be describing the experimental design and provide enough detail so that a competent worker can repeat the experiment. And these are usually presented in chronological order, what's first and then second, and then you should use subheadings, preferably matching them to the section on the research. And be objective and accurate, and you can use graphs, tables, photographs as needed. And then the last section would be your results, which shows your experiments at or present to here. Well, actually, this is not the last section. And the discussion is done at the last section, sorry. Here, the explanations are given of the results. Here, you want to present principles, relationships, and general relations that show the results. You want to point out any expectations or any lack of correlation and define unsettled points. You want to show how your results and interpretations agree or contrast with previous published works. And you want to discuss the theological implications of your work as well as any possible practical applications. And you want to state your conclusion as clearly as possible. Those are just a few of the blueprints there is, and there's plenty other formats for papers. And the revising section is definitely different from your editing. As one author said, the compulsion to include everything and leaving nothing out does not prove that one has unlimited information. It proves that one lacks discrimination. Revising has nothing to do with editing. Yeah. Revising is not checking to make sure every word is spelled correctly, every comma is in place. Instead, revising concerns the global issues in your paper, the organization, the content, the logic, and how it flows. The number one difference between a novice and experienced writer concerns revision. Beginning writers move directly from drafting to editing, where experienced writers do not bother with editing until the global issues are settled. You need to pre-digest the material first to make it easier for your audience to swallow. And to quote or not to quote, which in most grad papers is something important you have to pay attention to. You have to remember you can only quote the original source. You cannot quote somebody quoted by another source. You do not have to quote common knowledge, and you don't quote if you can paraphrase and summarize without losing impact. And again, the endnotes would help you at this stage of the game. And these are your basic three writing styles that you use in most grad papers. You have the Modern Language Association, which is known as MLA, then American Psychological Association, which is the most common one, APA, and you have American Sociological Association, which is kind of rare in most cases. And these are common mistakes that people make about their sources. With a Modern Language Association, you need to, with MLA, you need to double space your entire works cited page. You double space everything. You abbreviate words like university and press just to make it simpler. With APA, you don't capitalize the words in the journal or article titles unless it's the beginning of the title or after a colon, unless it's a proper noun. Those are the most common errors. And with ASA, people get those confused with MLA and APA because they share similar requirements. See, and proofreading and editing, which is toward the last section that you need to worry about. And you should allow yourself at least 24 hours before you start editing your work. This gives you a little time to forget about it and relax, and then you can look at your paper. And one way to do it is by reading the last sentence first of your paper, and then go to the next one and so on. This way you're allowed to read the grammar and the mechanics rather than the flow and the content. The flow and the content should have been dealt with in the revision process. So this is a very good way to look at the paper without getting confused on how it flows and whatnot, and just pay attention to the mechanics. And you can always visit the Writing Center at this stage of the game. And again, more feedback from your professors. The big difference between writing an undergrad paper and writing a graduate paper is the length. Grad students need to add transitions and connections to hold a 20-page paper together, because that is one of the hardest things to do. I see a lot of students just jumping from one idea to the next. Remember, the paper's got to flow. So transitions is the best way to change that. Transitions are key to making the writing clear and easy to follow, and it also helps you with clarification and make the connections or relationship between the ideas. See, with this one, this is a small example that has no transitions. If you read it carefully, you'll notice that there is some jumps from one idea to the next. And then here we have the same paragraph with transitions. And it does make the paragraph flow better, and it's easier to understand. It does show the connections between each parts. And transitions can be simple as single words like when or since or because, or they can be entire sentences. And with really lengthy papers, transitions can be paragraphs. Remember, you want to have clarity and be concise. And as one scholar said, occasionally I recognize what I call the squid technique. The author is doubtful about his facts or her reasoning and retreats behind a protective cloud of ink. And that basically means you're being too wordy. So you want to avoid things that are repetitive, especially in phrases. Instead of saying something cluttered like at this present time or at this point in time, where you can be more exact and just say now. And another one that's cluttered that I see often is aware of the fact that, which is just no, or due to the fact that, which is because. And some things that are totally unnecessary on the bottom section of your screen, you'll notice that it says absolutely essential. You don't need absolutely. Essential is pretty absolute in itself. So if you want to review those carefully. And you want to use short words instead of longer ones. Something plain and simple. Instead of using these big words, you can use simple words like aware, think of, do, and many, and after. See. And you want to keep your sentences short and clear, a max of 15 to 25 words per sentence. And you want to vary the length of sentences in paragraphs. This little example has short sentences laying long sentences. It does flow very well. The example is vary the length of your sentence, which is a simple sentence, and the next one's a compound sentence. Use short sentences to emphasize important points and long sentences to explain complex thought, but try to put one main idea in each sentence. And the last one, again, is a simple sentence. Short sentences are easier to understand. So if you vary your length of your sentences, the paper flows better and is easier to read. And remember, you want to use active verbs in your paper. The agent's usually your subject of the sentence, and you got your verb, and then you have your object. You want to say things, the teacher organized the material, not the material was organized by the teacher. Active verbs tend to be clearer, shorter, and to the point, where passive can be confusing, vague, and long. Let's see, more passive examples are the movie was watched by the audience, where it'd be more clear to say the audience watched the movie. And the problem will be caused by it, which would be better to it was caused by the problem. But I would avoid the word it if you could. And also the house was constructed by ABC Construction, where it should be ABC Corporation built the house. See, a good use of passive verbs, which you can use in some occasions, are to make a statement less hostile, to avoid assigning blame, specific reports as directed. Some writing requires to do that. Your professor should inform you of his requirements. And when the meaning of the sentence, or for some reason, it makes it more appropriate. And again, when you're using contractions, you don't use those in formal writing. Contractions are for informal writing or dialogue. You don't want to say don't, you want to say do not, and just follow the rest of those. The only time you use apostrophes would be to show possession in your formal writing. Put the apostrophe behind women's or Brown's or bus's seat, those sort of things. That's the only time really you should show apostrophes in your writing. And again, another big mistake is misplaced modifiers, where the student doesn't write exactly what he's talking about, and it's confusing. The first example is the dog chased the thief, barking as he ran. That's very unclear. We're not sure who was barking, the thief or the dog. So, and the other one follows the same way. The 5-foot American alligator was spotted by the park ranger swimming toward the Bayou's River restaurant. Again, it's confusing who was actually swimming, the alligator or the rangers. And the last example shows you the same way. We're not sure when Joe's injury happened. And again, the misuse of words. When you have an amount, if you use you want to use the word amounts, use this word when you refer to a mass or a collection. If you're having a number, use the word number when you're talking about units, And you also want to avoid the phrase and/or, just avoid it. And the same thing with he/she, just avoid that. Pick a side. And you should just delete quite, very, and really. Those aren't really necessary modifiers. And a lot of students get confused with the 3 theirs. The first there is a possessive pronoun, so you need a noun behind it. There, you could look at it as a direction, like over there, and you shouldn't use they are anyway. That's a contraction. Let's see, and again, some more misunderstood rules with which and that. Which is non-restrictive. It adds it adds more detail or new ideas, separates ideas. Where that is restrictive, which the information is critical to the understanding of the main clause. And here's some example with using that. Hospital policy that are tolerant to patients' needs should have a dual purpose. That's restrictive. It's part of the sentence and the idea. Where with which, it's not necessary. Hospital policies which are tolerant to patients' needs should have a dual purpose. And you notice which requires commas, where that does not. and more examples of which. Again, which is non-restrictive. So this example is the toughest intramural fight of all for Clinton was the North American Free Trade Agreement, which he undertook a full year before the '94 election. The last half, which he undertook, was extra information, is not necessary to what his main fight was. And the next example, or this just explains that. See, the next example is with that, which is restrictive. The Russian generals have delivered a message that is difficult to ignore. The last half is important because it relates back to the message, and you need to know what the sentence is about. See, and the more misunderstood rules with who and whom. A lot of people get that confused. If you remember to group them, it's one of the easiest ways to use them. Who goes with they and he, and they're all subjective case. With whom, it goes with them and him, and they're objective case. Another one that confuses students is affect and effect. If you can just remember, affect is a verb and effect is a noun. So that should make it clearer if you can remember those two rules. And another one with verb tense, when you're writing about others' findings or literature, you want to use present tense. When you're writing about your finding, unless you've had it published, use past tense. And one way to make sure you don't shift your tenses, you can tape this note to your computer screen to protect yourself from switching tenses for no reason. Because that is a common error a lot of grad students still do. And here we have some unspoken questions. So if you go through these, most students say they're uncomfortable with the vocabulary of the academic articles. Well, the best way to do is to learn to read them, is to practice, attend workshops, get a good writing handbook. But practice is usually the best thing to do. And again, a lot of students say, how can I keep all these ideas in my mind? Well, you really don't have to. You're not supposed to. You want to use note cards, annotate all your articles in your books. Definitely write things down is the best way to deal with it. And then some students say, I'm not familiar with the more intensive critical thinking process. How can I be? Well, the way to do is you can talk to your professors, your fellow classmates, go to workshops. Definitely read more. Again, it applies to practice. And have some more questions that you may have. Say, I get stressed out by all of this. How can I stop that? And the best way to do is use mini deadlines. If you start early, then you can ease the stress of your final deadline. So if you're working on assignments, get them started as soon as you get them, and just take your time. Say, I'm not confident with my writing ability. How can I be? Again, you can get help in any stage of your writing from either the TRC Center or the Writing Center. We can help you with brainstorming, creating a rough draft, and even help you with your final draft. But again, it does take practice. And of course, students say, we make this look easy, but it doesn't seem to work that way for the student. So why is that? Well, you've got to remember, writing is a circular process, and this presentation is a linear process. So if you take your time to realize that you can go back to the beginning and revise and whatnot, it make it easier. And I guess it all deals with starting early. So, and these are your sources that you can use. The first two, I guess, are the Writing Center here on campus. The Writing Center has one downtown and here on the main campus in the library. And then the Thomas Rivera has several labs here on campus and one downtown center. And for the web, you got Purdue Online, which will help you with your citing. And it does have some grammar sections on that. And the Dan Hacker is a good for doing research and documentation also. And then there's How to Organize Your Thesis is another good website. And then the Cleveland Writing Center has an online section too. And then the UT Writing Center from Austin is very helpful also. So I believe that's it, and thank you for listening.